Hey guys, I just wanted to talk about this video I found that Redmercy uploaded about a week ago that talks about good champions to one trick. Now before we get started, I want to say that I have nothing against Redmercy, I just disagree with some of his opinions. Also, yes, you can climb by one tricking the champs he recommends, also really any champ, but there are definitely better options that if picked, you'll see results faster and more easily. The first champion he mentions is Azir. I disagree with this. Don't one trick Azir. Azir is very weak right now in this meta and against all of the currently strong mids. Don't get me wrong, his late game is really strong, and Redmercy does mention this, but it's not worth it. His laning phase is very bad. Even if you're a one trick, you're still going to find yourself losing matchups, having a hard time coming out on top in the laning phase. His mid game is weak as well. If all you have is a Nash's Tooth and Berserker's Greaves, you aren't going to be doing very much damage. You can only really find true effectiveness late game with Azir after you get Rylai's and Rabadons. If you're one-tricking the champ, I'm inferring you want to climb, and maining Azir is going to make that climb a lot harder than it needs to be. A much better champion to one-trick would be Lysandra. She's much stronger in lane and has good roaming and a great team fight. If you guys want, I could make a detailed Lysandra guide to help teach you the ins and outs of Lysandra. The next champ he suggests is Zed. This one I do kind of agree with. If you learn the ins and outs of Zed, you can likely 1v1 your lane opponent. His roams are strong, and he is a strong champion in general right now. But if you're in low elo, I still wouldn't recommend it. Zed is a very complex champion, and if you're going to have a hard time finding effectiveness outside of the laning phase if you don't understand the game. I can explain this in a Zed guide video in greater detail if you guys want, because if you are really mechanically good on Zed and you understand the game, you can become really potent, especially in solo queue. But another champ you can try instead of Zed would be Talon. Talon isn't as complex as Zed and often more reliable and safer than Zed, and arguably he's better at punishing positioning errors and such in your opponents. If you do learn how to carry with Talon, the transition to Zed can be pretty easy. Next he mentions Ahri. This one is by far his best recommendation in this video. Like he mentions, Ahri is never really a bad pick, and if you do get good on her, you can definitely carry games. The problem with Ahri is that she's very skill shot dependent. If you miss your Q or charm, that's a huge chunk of your damage and CC gone. But if you do get good on her mechanically, Ahri could be a good option to climb with. Let me know if you guys want an Ahri guide in the future. Next up he mentions Gangplank. This champ is interesting. Yes, you can climb if you one trick him, but it's not going to come easy. He's received lots of nerfs to both him and the Adam C builds, and his success in lane is highly matchup dependent. If you're playing him in the mid lane, he's just going to simply lose to a lot of the current mids, and mechanically, he can be very challenging, especially in things like the triple barrel. I would recommend you play him top over mid just because you won't have as hard of a time in the top lane, and basically you're just an ult bot in lane anyway, because solo killing your lane opponent isn't that common. You can get solo kills if your opponent underestimates your ult, which can happen in lower elos, but by far a better champion to main would be someone like Annie. Instead of trying to combo barrels against group enemies, just play Annie, and when they group, just flash R. Next up is TF. One-tricking TF is a terrible idea. He has a very rough laning phase against all the mids right now. You're going to have to commit so much extra time just to learn and understand the matchups in the laning phase. Yes, your ult can be good in solo queue where your enemies are uncoordinated, but if it fails, then it just puts you even more behind in lane. The mechanics of TF aren't hard. His point and click CC and high damage, but to be successful with TF and to climb in the higher elos, you really have to understand the game. Another champ I would recommend instead would be any other champion. Next is Talia, or Talia, whatever. I don't know too much about this champion. I feel like her damage is kind of lacking, and her laning phase and wave clear did get super nerfed. Her ult is strong, but she seems to be one of those understand the game type champions, and I generally just wouldn't recommend her. Yasuo and LeBlanc are his honorable mentions, and yes, those are good one-trick champs as they're pretty complex, they have high skill caps, but they're kind of inconsistent. They're going to take quite a few games to learn before you can start finding effectiveness in them. Both of their laning phases aren't hard, you can often solo kill your opponent, but they're kind of similar to Zed in the fact that you're going to likely have trouble finding effectiveness outside of the laning phase. I'd say LeBlanc is better to one-trick because she's really potent if you understand her. She can easily one-shot squishies if you get ahead. Well guys, that's the video. Let me know if you'd like a quick or in-depth guide to any of the champs Redmercy or I mentioned. Thanks for watching and good luck out on the Rift.